You wanted the best. You've got the best podcast. The hottest podcast in the world. The Chris Voss Show, the preeminent podcast with guests so smart you may experience serious brain bleed. The CEOs, authors, thought leaders, visionaries, and motivators. Get ready. Strap yourself in. Keep your hands, arms, and legs inside the vehicle at all times, because you're about to go on a monster education roller coaster with your brain. Now, here's your host, Chris Voss.
I'm host Voss here from thechrisvossshow.com. Welcome to the big show, ladies and gentlemen. I'm so glad I don't have to sing that line. Did it for the first 14 years, and then we turned over the automation. Anyway, guys, we had an amazing young man on the show. We're going to be talking about his hot new book that just came out the presses in October 2024, 22nd of October, we should mention as well, because otherwise people will write me 10 years from now on YouTube and be like, it's not a new book. It's been out 10 years, dummy. So don't do that. It is called Communicating Under Fire, the Mindset to Survive Any Crisis and Emerge Stronger. Dallas Lawrence joins us on the show, so we'll be talking to him. In the meantime, go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss, LinkedIn.com/Chris Voss. Chris Voss on the TikTok and all those crazy places on the internet. Dallas Lawrence is a globally recognized crisis and reputation management expert who brings a unique perspective to the crisis world, having served in the highest levels of political, government, and corporate world. Today, he serves as advisor to multiple technology companies and executives, in addition to serving as an on-air contributor for Fox Business and Bloomberg TV on the changing media landscape. Welcome to the show, Dallas. How are you?
Great to be here.
Great to have you as well. Give us your .coms, any places on the internet you want people to maybe get to know you better?
Yeah, right now we're all about the new book. So Communicating Under Fire, you get it on Amazon, anywhere you buy a book, Barnes & Noble, your favorite booksellers, anywhere you go. But amzn.to is the best place to go right now.
Give us a 30,000 overview. What's inside the new book?
So the basic thesis of the book, and the book was really written for anyone with a reputation worth defending, whether it's your personal reputation, your company reputation, from the local school board leader to the CEO to the military officer on down, recognizing one fundamental truth, and this is the fundamental goal of the entire book, that it's simply a matter of when, not if, your crisis moment will happen. And in today's crisis-fueled, drive-by media scenario, it really is a matter of when, not if. And what the book really dives into is it says we've changed from that 24/7 media environment to one that I call the 1440 media environment. And that's how many minutes are in a day. There's 1,440 minutes. And every single one of those, there is an opportunity for a crisis to come your way, because the media is so starved for content that things that never before would have made the cutting room, to on air, are making it straight into the media and straight into homes around the world. So it's to be prepared for when, not if. And we walk through in the book the best things you need to do during your peacetime, quoting the great Machiavelli, use your peacetime wisely, how you prepare to make sure before your crisis occurs, what you do when it hits the fan, and then what you do to emerge out of that potentially even stronger.
Definitely. I mean, you're right. As a CEO, you've got to be prepared for this. Social media, I think, is an accelerant for some of the things you talked about. The media, if it bleeds, it leads, sort of thing. If they can throw somebody on the funeral pyre to light stuff up, they will. It's just one of those things. I mean, they're competing with so much other media content that's out there. The Kardashians.
Yep.
And but there's a lot of social media faux pas and gaffes that people can do. There's been stories. I think one of the famous ones was I think she was a PR agent, and she wrote something that was kind of racist, or it was something about South Africa that was awful. She got on the plane. She blew something off. She didn't have a big following. She didn't think they would make any sort of impact, and she woke up with her out of a job and her phone blowing up and all sorts of stuff. And so you just never know where it can come from. I've made a social media post, or maybe I wasn't clear on what I was stating, and people jump your shit, and then they'll share it, and then suddenly the whole world say, "Hey, dummy!" Fortunately, I've never had that quite happen yet, but there's still time.
It's funny that you mentioned that, because I actually have a chapter in my book on cancel culture, and the individual that you talk about is in the book, and she is kind of patient zero for the era and rise of cancel culture, where you had an individual who, she made a very insensitive joke about being white, so of course she won't get AIDS when she went to Africa. That was her line that she put on Twitter before she boarded a 14-hour flight By the time she had landed, literally an entire global mob was hunting her down. People had tracked her flight, recognized where she was going to be landing. They had already contacted her employer, a major marketing agency, asking them for a comment. And they had sent sleuths to the airport where she was landing to get video of her preparing to land. And the gross part about the whole thing, and why it really is patient zero for cancel culture, is it identified that folks weren't there to, people who were commenting online weren't commenting online outraged at her commentary or offended by it. There was almost a gleeful bloodlust to take the individual down and to mobilize a mob to destroy her. And it was a pretty powerful and profound moment, and it taught us a lot about the changing landscape today. It taught us a lot about, you mentioned that social media can be an instigator. In the book, I use the fire analogy a lot. That every crisis is like a fire, in that no two burn the same, but there's a science to them and how they burn. And that we see social media playing three roles. The first is actually, an instigator role that you talked about, where it caused the crisis, or had it not been for social media, the crisis never would have happened. The second that we see far more often is the accelerant, where it's the fuel that's thrown on a small crisis that would have stayed in a small town or country or a small office, that now makes this massive issue that we're having to deal with. And the third's the most important. It's the least talked about, and that's the extinguisher. How do you use social and digital tools today to put the crisis fires out and emerge stronger? But yeah, you're absolutely right. In this day and age, I love that you remember the genesis story of the cancel culture.
Patient zero. I like that. Yeah. I mean, it almost seems like we have an unruly mob of people that are very angry and not happy in life. And we're just moving from one crisis to another. They're almost like a mob with pitchforks and flames, whatever they're called.
Yeah, torches.
And they're just torches, and they're just wandering the city trying to figure out which place to burn down next.
That's exactly right. And what you're seeing is that there's organization behind it. Many of these groups do it for fundraising. So if they can be seen as taking somebody down, they can then pivot that and raise money from other interest groups. So there now is this isn't just organic. There actually are professional outrage machines out there that are organized to take down cause X or cause Y or individual A or B of the day. And that's the difference, right? So 20 years ago, you would be, most of these people would be stuck on a Skittles and Red Bulls high in their parents' basement, not able to get out, talking to themselves. Now they have, a medium they can reach into every home. As we saw with the presidential election, it wasn't ABC, NBC, and CBS, and Fox, and the Wall Street Journal that was the most trusted news sources. It was Joe Rogan. It was, and no discredit to Joe Rogan. This is actually a compliment to him. He's built a network outside of the mainstream media, and that's what all these outrage groups have managed to do. That's able to get their story amplified so quickly.
And it's almost like they're fighting over who can create the most outrage. You've got both sides of the political spectrum. It's a fight over who can, what's that line that they use? Who can basically rule the day. They can rule. It's a fight over who can get the loudest voice for that day or that week or whatever that project or whatever we're arguing about this week. And so you help people with the book. You help them understand how to navigate these, prepare for them. We've had people like yourself on the show before, and like you communicated at the beginning, preparing, you have to prepare for it. You got to know what to do when it happens instead of just flying blind and thinking, we'll figure it out when it happens. Because when the world's on fire, it's a little hard to decide. How do we put this out again? Yeah.
It's interesting. There's a reason why the subtext of the book, the subtitle is The Mindset to Survive Any Crisis and Emerge Stronger. Because it's, if someone says, I've got a list of the 20 things I have to do, that's not going to prepare you to have the mental, emotional, and kind of reflexive needs to know how to react in those crisis moments. As I said at the beginning, when you embrace the mindset that it's a matter of when your crisis is going to occur, you completely change how you plan for it, because most humans plan to avoid a crisis. They put all their effort into, how do we make sure we never have one? How do we have all the protocols in place to ensure we never have a crisis? They don't then take the next step to say, let's assume we're going to have one. And in our peacetime, what are the 10 things we would like to have if our crisis moment occurred? And the book goes through, the first half of the entire book is broken up into, what do you do before your crisis moment occurs? How do you identify your saints, saviors, and sinners out there, those who are likely to come to your defense, those who maybe don't know you yet and could be won over, and those who are absolutely against you. How do you understand who the loudest voices are? You said something that was very spot on, and that is that not all voices in a crisis are the same. Some are actually the ones leading the charge that all of the lemmings are following, and others are just blindly picking up the pitchfork and chasing. You don't need to worry about those folks. They can't turn a crowd, and they also can't stop the crisis. So how do you understand who those key voices are? How do you understand how to train your employees and your workforce to be crisis ready? One of my most profound memories to this day was I was in South America working for a large oil and gas client, and we went in to do a huge crisis drill. And this is a client that has crises quite regularly, and they're the oil and gas business. And I saw the general counsel hand his business card to the head of communications at the company. This is the first time they ever met each other at their crisis drill. And I said, "This is the problem. You guys should know each other and should be well associated with one another." So that's really kind of the key mindset. Once you've embraced that mindset that it's a matter of when, then you start shifting what being prepared means. Being prepared means it's going to happen. What are the key things I need to have at my disposal? And then you move into the second phase, which is, okay, it's hit the fan. How do I deploy all those things that I put in place?
Yeah. And having them in place ready to go. I mean, it's just battle, really. But yeah, it's interesting to me how people go looking for these things and jumping on them. You know, we saw that a lot with Me Too, where initially, you know, I would say that there were some things that need to be corrected. Maybe, you know, everybody knew about the casting couch in Hollywood. I used to own a modeling and acting agency in the 90s or the early 2000s. Everybody knew about the casting couches. And so, you know, there were some things that need to be corrected there. But it kind of became a thing where you started to see parts of the mob just looking for a way to be a part of it, to get a financial gain from it or some sort of leg up, you know, and it became so fevered, and mob fever, I guess you could call it, that, you know, I think one of the last things that kind of broke it was when, you know, people started attacking. I had a bad date, so I must have got Me Too'd. And it's, wait, I don't think this is what the original contents of this was. You know, wokeism started out, you know, as something that was important. It came from what black people struggle, but then it kind of got all hijacked and messed up and turned into all sorts of other things, to a point that you're just like, I think we've, you know, but the mob just goes, you know, kind of. It's been really interesting to me see the corner on this vigilante murderer who killed the health insurance executive. It's Friday, the brain's gone, and to see people celebrating the murder of someone with an opposing idea in what used to be a healthy culture of ideas, and we could have discussions about things. I mean, to see the mob take that and run with it, it's really discerning to me. You know, because if you study history, if you understand how these things work, this isn't a good turn when we turn to violence to reconcile what we should be debating and discussing. It doesn't end well for anybody. The people who roll out the guillotine are the ones who end up eventually on the guillotine.
Yeah, it actually speaks to the broader topic that we're talking about, and that is that in today's interconnected world, you can find your tribe, no matter how demented that they might be, anywhere, and find a group of folks who are like-minded and mobilize against a like-minded target. And that used to be a lot harder to do. You used to have to be more in the mainstream. You had to be more in the daylight. The benefit, however, for those who have a reputation worth defending, is almost all of that is still happening in broad daylight. They're just using social tools. So if you're paying attention to it, one of my favorite examples was I was working for a large hotel chain, and we knew we were about to have a massive union strike coming against us to protest labor negotiations. They just didn't know when and where it was going to happen. And we looked online, and we discovered they were using an online organizational tool that had a calendar that said exactly what time you were supposed to meet at the bus, who was bringing the coffee, who had the donuts, what the shift schedule was, what hotel they were going to be at, and what quarter.
Mob's organized.
So they were very organized, but they were doing it in broad daylight. And so that's the other side of this coin. While they have all this technology to be more connected in ways they've ever been before, it's equally easy to kind of take down that technology and recognize what's happening if you're out there and actively listening. You know, I think the heartbreaking thing about the CEO issues, I dealt with something similar back in the financial crisis 15 years ago. We had bus tours going out. If you recall, you have to go back in the time machine, bus tours looking and tracking down the home addresses of the CEOs of Wall Street to try to kill them. They called it the Lifestyles of the Rich and Infamous Tour. And they had postings where they would take pictures of kids at their school saying, this is so-and-so's kid, this is the school he goes to. And, with just some basic, good crisis communications and messaging skills, we were able to identify how they were finding that out. All of these CEOs in this example had given political contributions. And when you give a political contribution, you list your home address and it's listed on a public file. So they quickly identified that every single one of their executives was exposed by their home addresses. So we're seeing some of that kind of realization again today. The story of the healthcare CEO is heartbreaking because if you actually look at his life, this was a guy who came from nothing. He built himself up. This is not a billionaire, who was born to the money. He is the American dream. So it's, any death is a sad one, but how this has been so spun to not actually recognize and value his life story is heartbreaking.
And the battle of it's kind of become a joke on social media that this week everyone's a health insurance executive professional. And, last week, I don't know what last week's thing was. It's just everything's on fire nowadays. So it's just one burn.
Everyone's an expert.
Everyone's an expert this week of whatever's on the viral.
And the challenge, when I talk about that 1440 news cycle where every minute of the day has to be filled, because the real experts aren't leaning in to feed that beast, a vacuum is created. So you have this need for both the mainstream media, social media, and others to have constant updates every few minutes. And when they don't get it, they turn to less reputable sources. And that's when the bad things happen. That's when you start to see the misinformation spread. That's when you start to see really damaging effects happen to a brand or reputation because you've assumed you've told your story and you've gone back to your office to try to put out the fire, and you've assumed everyone else has kind of moved on, but they haven't. They're taking the story and going in their own different direction.
Yeah, and then you're trying to contain it, and it's like you said, it's spreading and taking on new different legs, and suddenly they're accusing you of murdering people in the 13th century, and you're like, what the fuck? You never know where conspiracy theory is going to go. I think Tom Nichols wrote a great book, The Death of Expertise. And like you say, how we we move where we don't trust scientists, but we'll trust the quack down the block who, I don't know, she decided that, coil silver is great for enemas. And, but she has a really shiny bum. Just wrote that joke. Sorry, I'm caught up on the shiny bum part. So you help people do this. You help them go through this crisis. How long have you been in the business doing the crisis management?
Started working for the President of the United States 25 years ago this month.
Which president?
I served him for 6.5 years, and then had so much fun doing that. I decided to go into it professionally as a corporate crisis counselor. So I did work for the two largest corporate crisis communications firms where I, it's a unique job where the client at the end of the day says, thank you so much. I'm grateful. I hope I never see you again because you've just managed the most painful moment of their lives. But it also gives you a front seat. I've been, the book, that's kind of unique about the book's approach is I break down each kind of key lesson. There's 23 or 24 key lessons in the book, and each one's based on a story. Mm-hmm. So I helped manage the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear disaster. There's a story there. I was brought into the Boston terror bombing. There's a story there. Mm-hmm. I've managed product recalls for some of the largest companies in the world. Each of those have stories. I've had celebrity clients where we've managed through the crisis in the cancel culture world. And each of those has a nugget or a story that comes out of it. So it's really designed to be a fun read, believe it or not, around crisis communication. So it's like a mini vignette, each one that comes through. But at the end of the day, it's where it comes from is when I left politics and I left the crisis communications corporate world full time, I moved to California and was asked by the University of Southern California's Annenberg School to come create their graduate course in crisis communications, which I was thrilled to do. And I went out there and I said, I had to build the book list for my students. And I was shocked that I couldn't find a single book that was any good. They were all terrible. There was how to write a press release, how to write a tweet. These are not useful things in a crisis. Yeah. And it was then that I said, I'm going to write the book that anybody could pick up and not need to hire someone for $900 an hour, which is the billing rate of a crisis counselor when the building's on fire.
I'm in the wrong business.
I know. That's why I said they say thank you, but never come again for a reason. That's what the goal of the book is, to give you kind of that crisis counselor in your pocket mindset so that you know how to operate when it happens.
I just put in president 25 years ago. Was it Bill Clinton?
No, George W. Bush.
George W. Bush.
Yeah.
So you helped. The one problem with George W. was dodging those shoes getting thrown at him all the time in Iraq. And
Problem. He was excellent at that. You got to watch that video again.
yeah, he was. I should say, yeah.
He's in the middle of. I think he was in Iraq.
Does the dodge? Yeah.
But he literally you see him just do it was quite good, actually.
Yeah, it was. It was kind of funny, actually. But I'm glad it didn't hit him. That's not appropriate.
It would have been embarrassing.
It would have been embarrassing. I mean, and he did enough gaffes on his own.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the next week or the week before, didn't he he walked to the wrong door that wasn't open? And
I mean, what's amazing is when you're president of the United States, 365 days a year, every minute you're on camera.
You got a lot going on.
But you also, it's pretty easy to make a blooper reel of that many days into 10 or 12 things. I mean, I have a biased opinion of the man, having spent a decent amount of time around him and seen how he operates and seen how he cares for people and the thought he puts into things. It was easy for the media to put him into one bucket when because that was kind of where they wanted to land him, because he sounded like a Texan. It didn't sound like he was from the Northeast. But at the end of the day, he was what I would say is he was a good man. And I value having a good man as president.
Yeah. Hold on, Dick Cheney was president. No, I'm just kidding. That's a joke. I do.
Also a good man, but nowhere near the president.
I always joke that it was the Dick Cheney presidency, but I think his father, Mr. Bush, threw some shit at that he really felt like Dick Cheney should maybe took it a bigger back seat, or there was a reference something about how there was a little bit too much mucking about in the back office.
The family politics are fascinating. Dick Cheney and George H.W. Bush thought about running against each other for president at one point, way back in the 70s and 80s. Cheney was a Rumsfeld guy. Rumsfeld thought about running against George H.W. Bush. So there's a lot of family issues there. You got to go back into the 60s and 70s and 80s to parse out.
Oh, yeah. I'm thinking there's a couple other ones, too, yeah. Was it Steinbrenner? Or am I thinking of the New York Yankees? Anyway, moving on. It's not the Bill Clinton or the George Bush show, presidency show, but no, I was just kind of curious. I mean, working for a president, you'll learn some communication under fire, It's definitely...
Yeah, part of the reason why we came up with the title is one of my jobs was I was a White House spokesperson for the war in Iraq. So I lived in Baghdad for a year, and we literally were shot at during a press conference. So it was I would tell my students when I would teach this class, I would say, you probably won't ever come under live fire from RPGs while you're trying to do a press event, but it'll feel like it at that moment in time when you're getting a blog post or a tweet fired at you. So it's important to have perspective and recognize that you're not actually being fired at in most cases, and then be able to kind of move forward once you have that awareness.
Yeah. I wish we'd get out of the cycle. I think you and I remember a day. I mean, if you're president, you're in politics, this is kind of par for the course, but this whole thing of just lighting anybody on fire, I remember I'd written something on Twitter, we put the podcast on Twitter, and somebody, started trolling me, and they were just being hateful, and they were being very bad at it. And so I said, hey man, what are you doing? We're trying to do something good here. And he goes, this is Twitter, it's our job to troll each other on here. And I go, no, it's not actually. I don't know what manual you got about Twitter, but technically this can be a place for good or bad. It could be a place where we all kind of lift each other up and rising tide lifts all boats, or we can, try and cut each other down. And maybe we should look to elevate the conversation as opposed to just attacking each other with just shitty ad hominems or whatever. And it's always been easier to point out the flaws than to offer constructive criticism on how to move forward. Talking to my ex-wives, huh?
But this was my aha moment. This was about 15 years ago. I love wine. Wine is my escape from the kids and the work and the crisis. Yeah. So I started a wine blog way back in the day, and I would review wine, and I would write, if I hated it or I loved it, I would still write both. And what I found was really a fascinating insight on humans that I've tried to embrace going forward. Which blog post do you think got more viewers? Wines that had a low rating or wines that had a high rating? And the answer is it's the wines that had the high rating, because people wanted to know what to buy versus what not to buy. They were interested in where, help me get better. Don't tell me what's bad. And I think that's how we're intuitively wired. It's harder to tell you which wine you should go buy versus laying out all the ones that are terrible. It's harder to say, here are the 3 steps you should have taken in your crisis versus saying, man, you're an idiot. You made these 10 bad steps. But people react better to that guidance that empowers them to be better themselves. It's harder, though. That's the challenge.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you would think that we would, I don't know, or human nature, whatever. It is what it is. Final thoughts as we go out. Tell people where they can pick up the book, any.com. You want people to find out more about you.
Yep, you can go to amzn.to. The book is Communicating Under Fire. I'm on Twitter at Dallas Lawrence. Hit me up there, or on LinkedIn. I love the conversation. One of the things I love about doing this is I give speeches around the country and I'm talking to folks, and I always love hearing people's stories. People come up and say, oh my gosh, I actually had somebody come up and said, I read your book. That was me in chapter 6. And I was like, oh, okay. But it's been a real blessing. I've enjoyed it very much. But yeah, Communicating Under Fire is the book. You can get it wherever you buy your books, on Amazon or online. And that's the book right there.
Thank you very much, Dallas, for coming on. We really appreciate it.
Thanks so much. Have a happy holidays. Merry Christmas.
You too. And thanks so much for tuning in. Order up the book wherever fine books are sold. Communicating Under Fire, the mindset to survive any crisis and emerge stronger. And if you're married, you might need it for, to keep that marriage happy too. You never know. You never know when the wife's going to be like, did you leave that toilet seat down again? Oh, geez. What's the PR book say again? Anyway, guys, thanks for tuning in. Be good to each other. Stay safe. We'll see you guys next time.